we'll get going from there. So.
All right, it is now 2 o'clock. I'm going to open up the panel so that everyone can start coming in. Some questions might be on Feedloop instead of Zoom, so keep that in mind, please. And let's have a great panel.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. Whoa, wow. Lots popping in. This is great. Yep, I see a lot of you are muting. Cameras are down. That's great. If you wouldn't mind all putting yourselves on mute as you come in, that would be great. Okay. Looks like some more still coming in. All right. Anyone just joining us, if you wouldn't mind just making sure your cameras are off and you're muted, that would be great. Just because we've got a lot of folks signing in. Okay. Oops. Okay. Can't tell if anyone else is coming in, but I think we should be good to start. Okay, so just wanted to start by saying just what an honor it is to have 3 such incredible authors on the panel with us today. We so appreciate you taking the time to participate in our first ever virtual Rochester Teen Book Festival. It's our 14th altogether, but first virtual. We're thrilled to have you all here. So welcome to Rena Barron, Shaun David Hutchinson, and Lisa McMann. So it sounds, hello. Sounds like we have Lizzie, one of our teen volunteers, and also Lizzie and Izzy, who are going to start us off with some introductions. Lizzie, you want to start us off?
Hi, everybody.
Oh, Izzy's going to.
Hello, and welcome back to our 2021 Greater Rochester Teen Book Festival. I'm Isabel Goldstein, she, her, and this panel is about writing bad characters that you love to hate. Before I introduce our wonderful authors, here are a few reminders. If you have a question or for any of the authors, please write it in the chat. Please remain muted for the whole session, and the session is being recorded. And also keep your cameras off. Now to introduce the authors. Shaun David Hutchinson was born in West Palm Beach, Florida on the 1st of May, 1978. He was a bad student who enjoyed sleeping through class, debate, theater, and being a pain in the ass. In college, he studied medieval and Renaissance literature before abandoning his degree to work in IT doing database design. Rena Barron grew up in small-town Alabama where stories of magic and adventure sparked her imagination. After penning her first awful poem in middle school, she graduated to writing short stories and novels by high school. Rena loves all things science fiction and fantasy, ghosts, and superheroes. Lisa McMann is the author of over 24 books for young adults and children. So far, she has written in the genres including paranormal, realistic, dystopian, and fantasy. Some of her most well-known books are the Unwanted series for middle-grade readers and the Wake trilogy for young adults. She hopes to keep writing books for a long time.
Excellent. Thanks, Isabel. Appreciate that. So sort of an interesting theme to have for this one, maybe applies to some more of your books than others, but maybe we could start off by whoever wants to take the first question, but maybe just starting off sort of where do you get your inspiration for your characters? It seems like just from reading about all of you that it could be, just from your experiences growing up and that sort of thing. But, just curious sort of where those characters kind of come from and pop into your head. Maybe Lisa, you're the one who's unmuted at the moment. You want to take that one first?
Sure, sorry. I don't know the answer to this question. This is a tough question for me. I don't really model my bad characters after anybody in particular, although I do have one bad character who is modeled after someone who has zero redeemable qualities in the Unwanted Quest series. But most of my main villains, I guess, are I just imagine, like, what's the worst thing someone could do to me? You know, like, what would I hate about, a character? Like, what qualities in them do I despise? And so I guess I apply those. I guess they're not even qualities, are they? But I apply those things to the character, and but then I always like to put just a one little redeeming thing, because I think for those of us who write bad characters, they're much more sympathetic and can cause a lot of conflict in readers if they've got something redeemable in them.
Absolutely. Well, and it seems to sort of being able to at times sort of have some sort of connection between the good and the bad characters, and see that, not all good characters have everything about them that's, squeaky clean, and same for the bad characters, that sometimes, you see those sort of crossovers and how they can sort of relate to each other in a little bit.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add that in general, I don't draw from anyone specific or one thing specifically when I'm thinking about writing bad characters. I'm more thinking about the real world. There are good things that happen, there are good people, but there are also really bad people in the world, and they can do some really awful things. So in a sense, we consume all this media, whether it is fiction or whether it's true stories, and you hear about all these things, and you just kind of sometimes take little pieces from what you hear, a little personality quirk here, a little one there, or people in your lives, and you kind of meld them into characters, and sometimes they become villains. But I do think the most important thing with what kind of how I think about writing characters who are bad guys is that they are the hero of their own story. Mm-hmm. So they need to be fully realized. And I don't know that anyone is completely unredeemable, that there is some quality, even very small, that we can relate to. And I think that's why sometimes we like these bad characters. We don't like necessarily the things that they do and the way they go about kind of making their decisions. But as long as we're kind of writing them to be realistic and kind of having their motivation, because that's it, right? I'm not really a fan of bad characters like, oh, this person is pure evil and they just do all these evil things. There's a reason, right? There's motivation behind it. And I think that's something I'm often thinking about when I write bad characters. And I will go ahead and raise my hand and say, I am such a huge fan of writing villains, because it allows you to explore kind of another side of kind of writing. It's not the squeaky clean protagonist, and they have reasons for doing the things they do. We might not always agree with it, though.
Definitely.
As I said, I don't really have much to add to that. I mean, like it's like, Rena said, like, you're like, everyone is the villain in someone else's story, and like we don't like to think about ourselves like that, like, I'm sure, and like, so I think a really good example for me is the show The Vampire Diaries, the first few seasons, right? Okay, so like they introduce like the villain and they're this horrible person, and then the next season you find that they are just as like vulnerable and messed up and emotional, and they have the things they want, and they give them all of these very human motivations, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, but now I kind of love them, but they're still evil, like they're still like mass murdering evil people. And so I think, yeah, it's just when you're writing the villains, you just have to kind of remember that, they're people too, even when they're not actually people.
Would you say that, Shaun, that maybe do you relate more towards your sort of good characters, your bad characters? I mean, I find, from researching some of your books and that sort of thing, that it's not necessarily that you don't have quite as much of that good bad dynamic as much, but sort of, I don't know, maybe battling some of those life challenges and sort of like inner demons almost more so, and with some of the characters.
I don't write a lot of like straight up villains. I think like instead of like, good characters and evil characters, I just have a lot of messy characters who are good and bad in turns, throughout the novel. Like one of my favorite characters is July from The Past and Other Things Should Stay Buried, and people really love to hate her. But I just adored her because like she's just there, and she just kind of stumbles through life making these mistakes and then apologizing for them and then making totally different mistakes, and I just kind of feel like I really relate to that, because sometimes like when it comes to life, I feel like a bull in a china shop. I'm just kind of like I try and like be careful and turn around, and I just knock over the whole display. and I kind of feel like we're all like that a little bit. Like we're all kind of messy, and we're all like breaking things and making mistakes and trying to do better. And a lot of times we just end up making totally different mistakes. And it's hard.
Yeah. Well, and the things I think we kind of see in ourselves as, bad, or like you said, messy, maybe someone else wouldn't notice that or wouldn't see that. And so just to show that, like you said, Rena, like any character can be sort of that good or bad, or have, parts of that in them, as long as, you are able to find that humanity in them and show that it's, not necessarily cut and dry all the time with those types of characters. Lisa, do you relate any more towards your good or your bad characters? It sounded like when you were talking about your bad characters that you would never even want to encounter someone like that in your real life. So I'm guessing more on the good side.
That's an interesting question. I guess, it depends which bad character we're talking about. But if we're talking about Aaron Stowe in the Unwanted series, he's my favorite character. He's the book begins, and we've got these twin brothers, identical twin brothers, and they one of them is considered wanted, and he gets to stay in this community and learn how to be part of the government someday. But the other twin, Alex, is sent to his death, which doesn't actually happen, fortunately. But Aaron, the one who stays in this dystopian world, becomes this sort of power-hungry teenager who wants to take over the role of the person who has caused all of these creative children to be sent to their deaths. So he wants that job. But we see in Aaron this really long, slow build of his character and who he is, and what influenced him to become the person that he is, and how he's so different from his identical twin. And I guess I loved building that character so much. I don't think I would probably be friends with him, though. I think you make a good point there. But he is my favorite character, and I think it's because he's the most complex one.
Yeah. I know Lisa and Rena, I mean, you both write in the teen arena as well as, more of that middle grade. Is it more challenging to write for villains for the younger kids, just trying to sort of have that balance of having that sort of bad energy, but maybe not making it quite as, I guess, scary as maybe for older kids?
I don't know, because so my Maya and the Rising Dark series, which is for middle grade, there's a bad guy and he's pretty scary. He's done some pretty horrible things. I think we don't want to foremost, we don't want to write down to our middle grade audience, because I do believe that that age group is very capable of understanding kind of the things that are going on in the world. And I think they're at that point where they're not just kind of focused on themselves and their family, but they're exploring the world and learning more, and they're seeing more. So they are sometimes encountering things that are a little bit scary, a little bit dangerous. This is the time of life where they're starting to understand mortality, and starting to understand that things aren't always sunshine and roses. So I don't think it's really harder, or you need to write down a character. Now, maybe you're not going to put as many details around some of the bad things happening. So with the Maya and the Rising Dark series, there's this Lord of Shadows, and he basically doesn't want any of the humans to survive. He's just like, destroy all humans. I'm not going to really go into, into this whole scene of him trying to like kill all the humans, but it's almost like the ideal and the looming threat of this person who wants to like destroy Maya's community, her friends and her family, that is actually more compelling than necessarily showing kind of some of the more graphics things that he's doing. It's just like, I spend more time talking about his motivation, because again, he has motivations and he has good reasons why he doesn't like humans. He might not be right how he's approaching it. But like focusing on that and kind of the bigger arc of kind of the tension of what's going to happen versus not necessarily showing kind of all the dramatic parts or the violence of it. But I would say that probably in my my Kingdom of Souls series, which is my YA series, there's definitely more. It's more cut and dry in the sense that yes, I do show more graphic representation of what the bad guy's doing, and there are actually multiple bad guys in Kingdom of Souls, and they're all they're not working together, they're competing for their own agenda, and that's kind of fun to write. But I do think it's a little bit of difference of kind of not talking down to the middle grade audience, but also kind of realizing that you don't always have to be graphic to show that a character is a bad guy per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I noticed that with both of yours, and I thought that was, an interesting way, or, that it probably takes some thinking, extra thinking, just to, like you said, just have it be, to not have all the gory details, but like you said, still have that feeling of, okay, this is a villain and not someone. And I think for the younger kids, in their real lives, they might feel like that too, where they might not see a ton of bad things all the time, but especially right now with what's going on in our country and in the world, they know things are looming, they know things are around. So, they pick up on quite a bit. Let's see, someone had a question in our feed loop. How do you come up with the bad character's goals? So I'm trying to think who might want. I'm guessing they would mean just sort of what the end game is for the bad guys. And you touched on that a bit, I think, just in terms of, like you said, having the motivation behind it as well, and showing that that's a big part of it.
Well, I'll weigh in a little bit on this. Yeah. I do think it's about understanding what their history is. So this is where kind of that world building becomes important. So the Lord of Shadows doesn't like the human world. Why? He doesn't like Maya's father. Why? And the why is because Maya's father trapped him in the dark, and he feels like he needs vindication and revenge. But he was a horrible guy, but he still feels like he was wronged, and he has to get back at him. So I really do think that part of having an end goal for your villain really is going back to the beginning to say why this villain wants this thing. So it's asking yourself a series of questions that would define basically every move and motivation behind the villain's actions and what they're trying to get to. And I think that's how we find kind of that end goal and what they want.
Right. And someone was curious too, just if maybe Lisa could take this one, if you would forgive a villain if he ended up taking a better path, or he or she did. It sounds like probably you would from what you had talked about before, and
yeah, I think that's a complicated question, but yes, I think I probably would, especially if it's if it was a real villain in real life, I don't know, but it's easy if I'm creating the character.
Right, you can have that quick turnaround, no problem.
Yeah, I can do that. I could make them do one thing that I would really love for them to do, and that would be forgivable for me, and then we've done it. So,
Right.
but yeah, I think, to what Rena was saying too, there's a lot of influence from their setting and their, the characters, just their environment, I think plays into how they make their decisions. Rena was talking about their history, what's happened to them in the past, and to create this, the person they are when the book begins. And also it's who is influencing them, and what are those characters like. And so I think it's a really interesting, you really weave a lot into the complexity of a bad character.
Definitely. And maybe Shaun, maybe you could touch on this, because your books really are more set in real life most of the time. How do you feel about sort of I guess forgiving these, whether it's a bad character or a bad life circumstance, or some of those inner demons and that sort of thing? I feel like you like to really show the humanity in your characters and sort of where they're coming from, and a lot of why they are the way that they are. So how do you feel sort of about like forgiveness of those characters, or that type of thing?
It's really interesting, because I think that there's a difference between like forgiveness and redemption. And so like very soon after I had written We Are the Ants, I actually wrote, there's a character named Marcus who is just awful throughout the book. And he follows this path, and it's like y'all said, the way he acts the way he acts, because he actually genuinely cares for Henry, but he has got a lot of internalized homophobia that causes him to act in ways that are awful. And coming to terms with that doesn't justify his actions. And so anyway, so after I was done that, I actually wrote a book from his point of view that sort of follows the events of that. And it will never see the light of day because it wasn't actually very good. But the end up theme of it is, and toward the end, Henry forgives him, but doesn't want anything to do with him after that. And so I think, redemption is something you do within yourself. Like, I know that I have done things that have wronged other people in my life, and I can ask them for forgiveness, and they can choose to give it or not. But redemption is about me trying to do better, not for other people, but for myself, to walk a better path. And so I think that, forgiveness, like, yeah, I could absolutely forgive people who have wronged me, and I have forgiven people who have wronged me, but that doesn't mean I want to be their friends anymore. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that they don't still deserve whatever sort of repercussions come from those acts. And it doesn't mean that I don't think that they can be better people, because I think we can all be better people. And I want to show that in the books. It's such a complicated thing, because we see this a lot in like movies where like a villain is redeemed and everybody is their friend now. And it's like, I don't know that that's necessarily how things would shake out. But for me, in like a weird way, forgiveness is kind of easy. It's everything that comes after that that gets really difficult.
Do you have a least favorite character someone would like to know, Shaun, in your books?
Oh gosh. I think Marcus is my least favorite character, just because he is like, not anyone in specific that I know, but like a group of people. Like, I have known enough people like that. And my dislike comes more from sort of a dislike of the circumstances that make people feel like they can't be themselves. I feel genuine sympathy for people who who wind up feeling like they can't be themselves and who act out because of that. But yeah, I mean, and he's probably the most villainous character that I've ever written. And even him, I feel a lot of sympathy for him.
Yeah. Let's see, we have a question here. Maybe Lisa or Rena, did you have ideas about your villain characters that didn't make it into books, or maybe ideas about villains that you have thoughts of for future books?
No, because, and I have a pretty simple reason for this, and it's because I write really sparsely, and I always have to add stuff to my book. So everything I'm thinking of makes it into the book, and I rarely have to take anything out, but I always have to add and flesh out ideas. So I might have an idea that I've put into the story for my villain, and my editor will come back to me and say, tell me more about what's behind this, and that's usually how it works for me.
I write just the opposite. I end up writing too much and letting the villains have too much fun in my books. And then I have to then go back and cut a lot of it. It's like, what if this is relevant to the actual story and the plot moving along? Because I still want the protagonist to drive the story. And as much as we want, there to be some sympathy or empathy for our villains, I mean, they're the villains. We still want you to love our main characters, or root for them at the very least, for success. So it's kind of funny because it becomes a balance of like, okay, how much of the villain do I need to have in here to not overtake or ruin the balance between kind of what the whole story is about and the protagonist's journey.
Right. Well, that kind of leads in, maybe you could answer to, why do you think that the bad characters or villains have kind of gotten so much love lately, just in terms of, do you think it's just that you guys are doing such awesome writing, and like you said, you are able to empathize with the villains as much as the protagonists?
Because people want realism sometimes. We want characters, whether they are protagonists or antagonists, if they're villains or whatever, we want characters to feel three-dimensional and to feel real. We want to see people make mistakes because we make mistakes. We're not perfect. And I think that people can relate to that. And sometimes some of the characteristics that a villain might have, maybe being selfish, for example, we can still relate to that. Who hasn't been selfish about something at some point in their lives? And it's not always a bad thing. And I do think it really just kind of comes down to it. If you're truly building out a villain that feels real and feels whole, then people can find something to relate to. And there is just something fun about rooting for a bad guy when they're not real. When they're real, not so much. But when they're on TV or in their book, there's something indulgent about being able to root for their side of things because there's no true danger.
Absolutely. Oh, and someone wanted to know specifically, Rena, if you have a least favorite character that you've written.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It seems like you like the bad ones, though.
I
so
like
maybe
them. Well, I do. Well, I guess in my Kingdom of Souls series, there's a couple of bad guys, but Effie is probably my least favorite of the villains because she is selfish and she's not redeemable, and everything she does, every move she makes is calculated towards like her goals, and her goals kind of switch back and forth just on a whim, and I can't keep up with it. It's like, what do you want? And everything you want is horrible, but that's just the character she is. But I guess there's a little bit about her that's redeemable, and I can't really talk about that part because I would spoil something in the book, but she does some really awful things through the book, and that's probably my least favorite characters for that. Like, there are other characters like the Demon King in this Kingdom of Souls series, and a lot of people started off like hating him, but now I have people who are like Team Demon King because they read book 2, Reaper of Souls, and they're like, oh, okay, now this all makes sense. So you just never know.
Yeah. Excellent. Let's see. Shaun, someone wants to know, what is your favorite book genre? Whether I guess, writing yourself, or what you like to read, what you like to read.
I mean, I guess it'll probably not come as much as a surprise that it's speculative fiction. I will always be a sucker for hard science fiction, but like speculative fiction that just sort of like peels back the curtain a little bit and peeks ahead into the near future is really interesting to me, both to write and to read, just because I think like we're always trying to sort of like see like what comes next and guess the paths and see where we're going. And I think especially now we're at this really cool point where a lot of things are sort of happening all at once, especially with like technology and all of this stuff. And it's really cool to imagine where things are going to go.
Excellent. Let's see. Lisa, do you have a favorite character in your books? I would say your least would probably be Alex.
No, I like Alex a lot. I love Aaron. Do I have a favorite character? I think there are some minor characters who I really adore writing, and maybe it's because they don't have a huge presence that makes them really fun and I don't get tired of them. One was Mr. Apple Blossom in the Unwanted series. He spoke in iambic pentameter and in rhyming couplets. And so that was a really fun character to write. He was the theater instructor, so he was, just a really theatrical kind of character. So I really enjoyed writing that character. I have a young adult series called the Visions Trilogy. And I had so much fun writing the three siblings in that trilogy. And just I think it was the dynamics between Jules and her brother and sister and their support of each other that was really fun. Instead of writing siblings who hate each other or who are always fighting, I wanted to see a support group. And I started, after that trilogy, that started to become a theme in my other books too, having siblings who are going through something together or supporting each other. And I really, really found something just refreshing about that. And so I guess that's where I'd go with that question. Thank you.
Do you have siblings yourself, Lisa?
I do. Yeah, I have two older brothers and a younger sister.
Oh, so you can relate to to having some siblings around.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Lisa, while you're off mute, do you have a least favorite part of your job? Or
I love what I do. There are some hard parts. Sometimes when I have a deadline and I know that I'm running a little bit behind, one of my least favorite parts of my job is checking my email to see if my editor's in there asking, where things are. And, honestly, I really just love what I do. I love writing. I love interacting with fans, especially. I miss being at a signing and talking to the people who come to the book signing. That's what gives me life, and gives me energy to continue doing this, because it is a hard job. But, I can't really even think of anything that is a worst part. I really just love what I do.
That's awesome. And Rena, you were nodding your head a lot through that. So.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think there's kind of two parts. There's a business of writing and there's a craft of writing. And we love writing. That's why we're writing. We love telling stories, and we love for people to read stories. And we like to be able to talk to people about those stories, whether it's like a Zoom event or if it's in person. So all of that's really fun. Sometimes deadlines are what becomes very difficult because authors love to tell stories. So we get so into our stories and we're working on our crafts and we're just kind of lost in these worlds sometimes. And we know that it's going to take a little bit longer to get to where we need to be than that deadline. That deadline's here, and we're all the way over there. And there is that moment of like dread of having to either wait for your editor to email you, or either emailing your editor and saying, I know I told you it was going to be done by this time, but I need another month, not like another day or two, but like significant amount of time. So I feel like that's maybe the only kind of uncomfortable thing.
Oh, pumpkins in the window.
That's probably the most uncomfortable thing I feel about the whole writing process. But like but the writing of itself, take away the business side, it is such a beautiful thing and such a wonderful thing. There are ups and downs because the story doesn't always come or flow easily, but just when you get through it and you're at the end and you feel like that book is where it needs to be, that story is singing to your heart, there's just no other joy than to have that, and then to know that you're turning that over to readers to react to and enjoy. So yeah, it's really hard to say a not likable part about my job.
Well, that's excellent. And Shaun, you were nodding a lot. I'm guessing you agree with Rena and Lisa.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like the only parts that like I hate about the job are like doing taxes. And traveling. Like I like being places, I hate having to get there. But like everything else is great. Even like meeting with fans. Like I'm a total introvert, so like I have to like prep myself, for a lot of interaction, and then when I'm done, like I will hermit myself away for like a week. But I still I love doing that. It's worth the effort.
That's excellent. Well, maybe with all the sciencey stuff coming up, some teleportation devices will come your way.
Oh no, don't do teleport. No, because that'll just make doubles of you. That's what always happens. Don't you won't catch me in one of those.
Gotcha. Okay, noted. All right. We've got maybe 2 more questions here that we can go through. Let's see. So someone wanted to know, do you ever draw or sketch your characters kind of just to get the feel of them and such, or for fun?
I was actually gonna oh, Lisa, you were gonna go. You go.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm terrible at drawing, and so I was never able to do this. But 6 months ago, I think I found these really cool machine learning, artificial intelligence programs that allow you to make portraits. And so you can make it's kind of like deep fake technology, but it's not video. And so you can make completely original portraits, and you can drive every aspect of it. And then there's other apps that you can then take in and style hair and do all of these things. So it's like learning, creating these character or computer generated portraits. It's really cool. So you don't have to actually be an artist. And I've been doing that a lot, and it's really awesome. It's super helpful.
Wow, that's cool. What type of information do you put in for that? How do you tell the computer what you want?
Well, sometimes you can start with a base picture and then just work from there. So you can start with something you can start with a picture of yourself, and then you can just drive different there's tons of different sliders and things you can do, and you can change stuff like that. You can age it down or age it up, or add change the hair color, change ethnicities. It's it's limitless. One of my I started out, the first thing I found was it was going around a while back. It was called the Face app, and it was you could change your picture and make yourself younger or whatever. But one of the things that they added was the ability to start merging pictures. And so I would just start merging pictures and creating a completely original face. And then I found another program. It was called Art Breeder, and that's where you can start. You can start with just a random picture and then just move from there. And it looks nothing like the picture that comes out, at the end. It's really cool. There are a lot of really interesting tools.
Well, it's neat to still be able to be, like you said, if you're not a really great drawer, you can still be creative and artistic in a different way. So that's neat. Thanks for sharing. And Lisa, I know you were going to chime in on, do you do some sketches?
I do not at all. I'm not good at drawing, and I don't think my mind works that way. I don't really have good pictures of what my characters look like. But my son is an amazing artist, and he's in his 20s now, and he's a professional artist. And so, but when I was starting the Unwanted series, he was 17 and going into college and wanting to be an artist. And I would pay him to draw some art for me so I could use it for my school presentations. And so everything that I picture my characters to look like came from his mind, not really mine. And then people, fans of the books, have just done so much amazing art for the Unwanted series. The hashtag The Unwanteds, you could search that and find all kinds of characters. If any of you are out there who have drawn characters of the Unwanteds, just know that I love it. I love what you're doing. And I think that you are so talented. And I wish I had the gift of being able to draw, but I don't. So I love that you're doing that. Keep doing it and keep tagging me.
What about you, Rena? Where do you fall on the
Yeah, I fall all the way on the can't draw at all to save my life. But I do actually have a very clear visual ideal of what I want my characters to look like. So early on with the Kingdom of Souls series, I actually commissioned the main character to be drawn 3 times by 3 different artists. And it was just something that was important to me because I knew exactly what I wanted her to look like. So I eventually then had a bunch of other characters sketched out as well. So I'm good at telling like artists, like, here's what I'd like it to look like in words, because I'm good with words, but I can't draw. And so I kind of work with them to kind of get the portrait that I'm looking for. And then I've got all those up on my website, kingdomofsoulsbook.com, so people can kind of go look at that. But yeah, no real artistic hand for me at all. Just the vision, and that's it, not the talent.
Well, you don't find very often that you get both. So, you got to focus where your talents are. So that's awesome. Well, let's see, we have maybe 3 minutes. So there was one more question that maybe we can answer. Let me just scroll up here. Let's see. Rena, do you find it harder to write a likable villain or a nice protagonist doing the right thing?
Oh, wow. I don't think it's ever easy to write a likable villain. Because again, I think that's actually quite hard because they're the villains. So they're doing something wrong. They're doing something that we might think is morally wrong or morally gray. So they're not easy to write. I think just in general, writing a protagonist who's kind of doing the right thing is pretty common. They're going to still make mistakes. We don't want them to be flat. We still want them to be very fully realized. And with the R character from Kingdom of Souls, like she's trying to do the right things, but she's still making mistakes. And I think that's the layering that we want to always add in their characters, that yes, they might be trying to do the right thing and they might be on that path, but they're going to make mistakes along the way. And that's what actually makes for an interesting story, because then that takes you on all of these detours and different roads that you may not be expecting.
Right. And Shaun, I saw you nodding there too. I think that's probably a lot for your characters too, just allowing that not to necessarily be always, good and bad. And I think that's, what kind of the theme's been throughout this panel today is, it's not necessarily always black and white.
Yeah. I mean, I think about as Rena was talking, I was thinking about my stepdad, who, my mom remarried when I was 10 and he was my father for basically, and I looked up to him and I respected him. And then over the last 5 or 6 years, he has become someone completely unrecognizable to me in terms of certain political leanings that I don't want to get into, but, and he has become, and so I know that people who meet him now and don't know him probably think he's a jerk, probably don't like him. And yet I still love him because he's my dad, because I know I have all of this history, behind it. And so I was thinking, likable villains is kind of hard, but also it's kind of not, because I feel in a weird way, we probably all know some likable villains. We probably know people that we like that maybe other people wouldn't necessarily like. I don't know. It's weird and complicated, and villains are so complicated. I think it's easier to write people doing the right things. But then like readers don't like them as much. Y'all really like the villains and side characters a lot. Like Lisa was talking about like her character that writes in iambic pentameter, and like I don't know if y'all get it, but I always get people going, oh, can't we have whole books about such and such side character? And I'm like, you would hate them by the end of a whole book, like on their own.
Oh, all right. Well, it looks like we are just out of time. We so appreciate Lisa, Rena, and Shaun. We loved having you here. You really, shared some great insights on your process and your books and just you as people. So we really appreciate you joining us today and taking the time for that. So I'm assuming you might have some other panels, and so have fun with those. And thank you again for participating with us today.
Thank you for having us. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Thanks all volunteers.
Thank
Thanks
you
everyone for coming. Don't forget to go to the TBF website, check out the merch store and all that fun stuff. All right.